The War Council station loomed like a jagged crown above the neutral world of Valen, its surface bristling with spires and docking arms. To Staff Sergeant Jack Mason, the place looked less like a seat of diplomacy and more like the fortress of an empire that didn't believe in equals. He stood rigid in his dress blues, boots polished to mirror shine, metals glinting under the pale glow of alien lighting. Around him, rows of Marines mirrored his stance. They were the chosen face of Earth, the first uniformed humans to stand before the Galactic Concord. Mason could feel the weight of 1,000 eyes, some curious, most mocking. The chamber itself was a coliseum of power. Tiers of alien delegates filled the amphitheater, their voices a low, constant buzz. Some were reptilian giants with armored hides. Others floated, translucent bodies pulsing with light. A cluster of insected diplomats clicked their mandibles in amusement as they glanced down at the humans. Mason heard the whispers. Not English, not any language he knew, but the translator in his ear caught the tone. Fragile things. They look soft. Their bones will snap like twigs. Tribute fodder. Nothing more. His jaw tightened. He didn't look left or right, but the men beside him were tense, shoulders stiff. They heard it too. Discipline kept them still. At the center dais, the Concord Chancellor, a robed being with a crown of tendrils, raised his hands for silence. The voices dimmed. By unanimous decree, the Chancellor intoned, the species known as Homo sapiens is welcomed into the Concord of civilized worlds. A pause dramatic. With the condition, the voice hardened, that Earth provide 10 million soldiers to serve as tribute in our wars. The declaration rolled through the chamber like thunder. Some aliens cheered approval. Others hissed agreement. Humanity's ambassador, a weary diplomat from New York, flinched but held his composure. Mason's gut burned. 10 million. They weren't joining, they were being harvested. He kept his eyes forward, jaw set. He wasn't here to speak. He was here to stand. From the opposite tier, heavy footsteps echoed. Mason's gaze shifted slightly as the crowd parted for a figure descending toward the humans. A giant, over 9 feet tall, clad in ornate armor etched with battle scars. The plates gleamed like obsidian, ridged with spikes. His face was partially hidden behind a ceremonial mask, but the exposed mandibles flexed in disdain. Commander Threxer of the Varn Dominion. Mason had read reports. The Varn were one of the oldest warrior species in the Concord, their soldiers feared across dozens of systems. If the Concord had a mailed fist, Threxer was it. The alien approached slowly, savoring the silence. He stopped in front of Mason's formation, scanning the Marines like a man appraising cattle. Finally, his gaze locked on Mason himself. This, Threxer said, voice booming through the translator, is humanity's finest? Mason didn't move. His heart thudded, but his eyes stayed cold. Threxer leaned closer, mandibles twitching in amusement. So small. So soft. Do you even bleed as real soldiers do? The chamber chuckled. Mason's men bristled. His fingers flexed once against his trousers, silent command for them to hold. Threxer's head tilted. Perhaps a test. Before Mason could react, the alien's clawed hand whipped across his face. The crack echoed like a gunshot. Pain flared white-hot across Mason's jaw. The blow rocked him sideways, boots screeching against the polished floor. He tasted blood, sharp and metallic, spilling across his tongue. For a heartbeat, the chamber held its breath. Then the laughter started. 1,000 voices, guttural, shrill, booming. The spectacle had delivered exactly what they expected, the humiliation of a human. Mason staggered but did not fall. He forced his stance steady, spine iron straight. Slowly, deliberately, he turned his head back toward Threxer. Blood trickled down his chin, but his eyes burned steady, unflinching. Threxer loomed over him, waiting for collapse, for fear, for submission. Instead, Mason's mouth curled into a crooked smile. That all you got? The translator carried his words across the chamber. For the first time since humanity had entered this place, silence fell, not laughter, not mockery, but stunned silence. The Marines behind Mason stood taller, pride flashing through their discipline. Threxer's mandibles twitched, amusement flickering into irritation. He had meant to make an example. Instead, the example had shifted. The crowd whispered again, but the tone had changed. Mason held his ground, blood dripping onto the polished floor. His fists clenched tight at his sides. His training screamed restraint, but the old Marine instinct, hit back harder, burned in his chest. The commander loomed closer, his armored bulk blotting out the chamber lights. His voice rumbled low enough only Mason could hear. "Careful, little prey. The galaxy watches." Mason's eyes narrowed. His voice was steady, controlled, lethal. "Yeah," he muttered. "They're about to see something new." The chamber buzzed, a storm brewing. Delegates leaned forward, sensing the spark of something dangerous. 3 seconds hung between them, heavy as gravity. And in that silence, the galaxy waited to see whether humanity would bow, or strike. The chamber had gone quiet. Not the quiet of calm, but of anticipation, the kind that stretches the seconds into eternities. Hundreds of alien eyes, curious and cruel, trained on Mason. Every muscle in his body burned, not from pain, but from a controlled, simmering fury. He tasted blood on his tongue, felt the sting along his jaw, and yet every instinct screamed restraint. Just long enough. 3 seconds had passed. He moved. Mason's fist struck before the crowd could blink. Years of training, instinct, and sheer human stubbornness coalesced in that single motion. His knuckles collided with Threxer's armored skull. The sound wasn't just a crack, it was a statement. Bone against reinforced exoskeleton, amplified by the force Mason put into it. 10,000 human battles screamed in that strike. Threxer staggered, the impact reverberating through his massive frame. He blinked, if a Varn blinked, and then collapsed, limbs folding under the alien weight. Silence hit the chamber again, heavier than before. Humans stared, wide-eyed. Marines frozen in shock. The alien delegates stared too, some in disbelief, others in growing fear. One of the insect representatives let out a hesitant clicking sound, and the murmur spread like wildfire. Mason wiped the blood from his lip, tasting iron and grit. He straightened, boots scraping the polished floor. His voice cut through the stunned air. "On Earth, we hit back." The translator carried the words into every corner of the chamber. No hesitation. No apology. No bowing. Just truth. Alien guards hesitated, uncertain whether to intervene. None had ever seen a human, fragile, small, supposedly insignificant, destroy a Varn commander in a heartbeat. "You!" hissed a Varn adjutant from the tier above. "This species is unnatural." Mason's eyes swept the room. Fear and awe mixed among the delegates. Some clutched weapons. Others whispered frantically to each other. And somewhere in the chamber, a few voices, a quiet minority, spoke of respect. One of the human Marines, Private Hale, whispered, "Did he just?" Mason's jaw tightened. "He hit first. I finished it." The Marines fell into defensive positions, surrounding Mason instinctively. Their rifles didn't fire, but the gesture was clear: Earth soldiers would not yield. The chamber, filled with centuries of alien tradition and intimidation, was suddenly unbalanced. From the dais, the Concord Chancellor's voice cut sharply. "Order! Security! Restrain this human immediately!" 2 guards surged forward, claws and weapons ready. Mason didn't wait. He pivoted, dropping into a low stance learned from countless drills, and sidestepped the first grasping hand. The second guard slammed into him, momentum carrying both to the floor. Mason rolled, leveraging the guard's own mass, and rose again, breathing controlled, deliberate. "This isn't about survival," Mason growled under his breath. "This is about sending a message." Aliens shouted. Delegates argued violently. Some demanded execution. Others argued hesitation. They had underestimated humans, and now the reality of their strength, or at least their unpredictability, drove them to fear. Mason's voice boomed over the chamber, carried by both translator and presence. You wanted cannon fodder. You wanted weaklings. You wanted submission. What you got instead is humanity. We survive, we endure, and we fight back. A ripple of murmurs raced through the alien spectators. Some stepped back instinctively, others leaned forward, measuring the truth in his words. He could see it, the realization that humans were not just fragile meat, but something far more dangerous, stubborn, relentless, unbroken. Do you understand? Mason added, his voice low, deadly. We don't fear death. We make death fear us. The chamber erupted. Shouts, clicks, hisses. Delegates pointed, argued, threatened. The security squads looked at one another uncertainly. This was unprecedented. A single human had shattered the expected order. Amid the chaos, Mason noticed the Earth ambassador frantically signaling, trying to de-escalate. He shook his head, still bleeding, still steady. There was no time for diplomacy. Not now. The moment demanded clarity. One of the Varn delegates, older, with battle scars across his exoskeleton, spoke with trembling voice. You cannot be stopped. One strikes and the rest. Yes, Mason said, voice carrying like a hammer. The rest will see. The rest will learn. A line of alien guards advanced, but the chamber's floor quaked as the remaining Marines fell into a defensive wedge around Mason. They were disciplined, trained, but the message was clear: anyone foolish enough to strike first would pay. Blood would not be the only currency today. Mason turned to face the council again. You think you can humiliate us? You think we are weak? But this, he gestured to the fallen Commander Threxer. This is proof. Not just of strength, but of what humans endure. You will not break us. Not in 100 battles, not in 1,000. The chamber split. Half recoiled in fear, whispering about the unpredictability of humans. Half seethed in anger, insisting execution was necessary. The Chancellor's voice boomed, trying to regain control. Enough! Restrain the human! 2 more guards stepped forward. Mason met them head-on, stance firm. He did not fight to escape. He fought to demonstrate. Every block, every sidestep, every counter was precise, measured. He could feel the council's gaze calculating, weighing the cost of pressing further. Finally, armored hands closed around him, dragging him toward the tribunal chambers. The Marines followed, disciplined and alert, leaving a trail of stunned delegates in their wake. Mason's jaw was stiff, bloodied, but his eyes burned with the fire of defiance. As he was pulled past rows of whispering, shocked aliens, he whispered to his men, just loud enough for them to hear. They wanted soldiers. They wanted weaklings. They wanted submission. They'll remember this day. And the Concord's chamber knew, at that moment, that Earth had arrived not as prey, but as a warning. The tribunal chamber smelled of ozone and polished metal, a tang of fear lingering in the air. Mason was dragged forward, wrists shackled, boots scraping the floor. Around him, the Council of the Galactic Concord waited, hundreds of alien delegates, each species more alien than the last, each one judging humanity's fate with cold, calculating eyes. He felt no fear. Only the weight of responsibility. Every human aboard this station was counting on him, not to win, but to show that humans were not prey. That they would not kneel. The chamber had been tense before, now it was electric. The Varn delegates were vocal, their clicks and hisses slicing through the air. Execute the human! One shouted. Send Earth a lesson it will never forget! Others, the older species, whispered in uncertainty. If one human can kill a Varn commander in seconds, what might an entire army do? Mason's jaw ached, the blood still drying along his cheek. His fists flexed against the chains. He scanned the room. The Concord Chancellor, robed in ceremonial gold, raised a clawed hand. Silence! The voice resonated through the chamber. Human representative, speak before your judgment. Mason stepped forward, chains clinking. The eyes on him were hostile, but he moved with the calm certainty of a predator. I don't speak for myself, he said, voice steady, carrying across the chamber. I speak for every human who has survived against impossible odds. For every one of my people who has stood in the face of death, unbroken, and endured. Murmurs rippled through the delegates. Some leaned forward, intrigued, others stiffened, warning each other. We were told to submit, Mason continued, his tone unwavering. To provide tribute, to kneel, to be cannon fodder for your wars. We were humiliated in your presence. One of us was struck as though we were insects. I reacted. He didn't pause. You expect us to be fragile. You expect obedience. But you misjudge what it means to be human. We do not break under insult. We do not crumble before force. We fight. We endure. And when we strike, we do so with everything we have. The room went still. Even the whispering subsided. The delegates were listening. Some in fear, some in awe. Mason's words were sharp, clear, undeniable. You can kill one of us, he said, but the rest will not cower. You can threaten us with annihilation, and we will still stand. We have fought wars on our own world that would crumble your civilizations. We survived disasters that would crush species 10 times older than ours. And yet here we are, alive, defiant, unbowed. A Varn delegate hissed, mandibles quivering. This is arrogance, foolishness. We are the Concord. You are insignificant. Mason leaned forward slightly, chains rattling, voice rising. Insignificant? You call us insignificant while you harvest our soldiers. You call us fragile while we walk into your halls without fear. You call us weak while we take one of your finest and send him down bleeding to the floor in seconds. You've measured us by your expectations. You've underestimated us. That was your mistake. The chamber erupted into debate. Some delegates demanded immediate execution. Others warned that killing humans might trigger rebellion, or worse, a war they could not control. The Concord Chancellor slammed a hand onto the podium. Enough! This council will deliberate. But the actions of this human cannot be ignored. Mason was pulled aside, but his voice carried again, cutting through the chamber. You may decide my fate, he said, blood still glistening along his jawline. You may even destroy our planet tomorrow if you choose. But hear this, Earth does not kneel. Humans do not beg. We will endure, we will fight, and the galaxy will know that we are not to be trifled with. Respect is earned, and we will earn it, one way or another. There was a pause, a pregnant silence. Delegates glanced at one another, weighing what they had seen. Fear mingled with a grudging respect. One of the older alien leaders spoke softly. Perhaps the humans are not so fragile as we assumed. Others murmured agreement, reluctant but undeniable. Mason's stance, his defiance, his ability to strike without hesitation, it forced a reconsideration. They had not accounted for the human spirit, the stubborn, relentless will that refused to yield even when every law of the galaxy predicted their defeat. The debate raged for hours. Some demanded punishment, others advocated caution. The Concord split, not just along species, but along the lines of fear and respect. Mason, shackled, listened. He did not speak again, but his presence, the calm, unbroken figure, spoke louder than any argument. Finally, a resolution emerged. Humanity would not be enslaved, nor fully equal. They would receive provisional warrior status, acknowledged as capable, dangerous, and worthy of being counted among the Concord's forces. Not as equals, but not as cannon fodder either. The chains were removed. Mason flexed his shoulders, jaw stiff, muscles still tense. Around him, the human Marines regrouped, relief mingled with pride. He looked at them and allowed a small, grim smile. You see? He said quietly. They wanted soldiers. They got humans. The ambassador approached, face pale but eyes shining with admiration. You've done something no diplomat could. You've earned our people a place at the table. Mason shook his head. No. We haven't earned a seat. We've reminded them we exist. And we aren't weak. That's all we need. He turned toward the viewport, looking out across the vastness of space. Stars stretched in every direction, a galaxy of empires, threats, and possibilities. Humanity's footprint was tiny, almost laughably small. But Mason felt it differently now. The galaxy had seen what humans could do in a single, decisive moment. And it had learned not to underestimate them. Let them remember this, he muttered to himself. Every system, every species, every council. We do not kneel. We do not break. We endure. Behind him, the Marines adjusted their gear, standing taller than before, a formation of discipline and pride. Mason allowed himself a deep breath. Blood still coated his cheek, his jaw a dull ache, but he felt alive, not just alive, but unbowed. The Concord may have thought they were taming a fledgling species. Instead, they had unleashed something entirely different, humanity's defiance, raw and undeniable. Mason turned back to the council chamber one last time. The delegates watched, some with grudging respect, others with lingering fear. The message was clear. Humans could be challenged, tested, even struck, but never subdued. And in that moment, Mason understood something profound. Not power, not weapons, not technology. Humanity's true strength was its spirit. And that spirit had just stamped its authority across the galaxy. They wanted soldiers. They now knew what a Marine is.